Everyone, and welcome. My name is Kristin Suleng, a science and technology journalist based in Valencia, and it is a real pleasure to moderate today's Roundtable Semicon, Dircoms, and Semiconductor communication strategies as part of the third Valencia Silicon Forum. First of all, I would like to thank Valencia Silicon Cluster, VASIC, for making this conversation possible. And I would also like to thank VASIC for the vision and the courage to include communication among the strategic topics of the forum. Communication is often overlooked in discussions about semiconductors, despite the fact that we live in what is often called the information society. We talk about technology, investment, talent, industrial policy, and innovation, but much less frequently about how semiconductor ecosystems tell their stories, build visibility, and position themselves internationally. Yet, communication has become a strategic factor in attracting investment, talent, partnerships, and public attention. That is exactly what we are here to discuss today. Before we begin, a quick reminder to the attendees, the audience, please feel free to post in the chat throughout the session. We will reserve a few minutes at the end of the audience questions, and we'll try to include as many as possible. And then we are fortunate to be joined by four excellent speakers representing journalists, specialized media, ecosystem building, and international collaboration. Join us today, Paige Hookway, managing editor of Electronic Specifier, Pat Brans, international technology journalist and contributing writer for EE Times and EE Times Europe, Riccardo Busetto, technology and electronics media specialist, and Luc Yao, operating partner at TAC Plus. I think I mentioned this is a pronunciation, TAC Plus or TACC Plus, and BeyondFence. Thank you all for being here. And to begin, I would like to invite each speaker to share an opening perspective of around 5 minutes. Rather than a formal presentations, we hope to hear experiences, reflections, and observations from your professional work. Paige, may I invite you to start?
Sure, yeah. I mean, where do I start? That's the question. I guess 5 years ago, if you were to ask a politician what a semiconductor was, they probably would have given you a very blank and confused look and not really known how to answer you. But today, you know, semiconductors are discussed in cabinet meetings, referenced in trade negotiations, cited in national security concerns by governments, you know, across all the continents. And I think that shift happened very fast, quicker than anyone in the sector ever anticipated. And it was driven by a number of things. I think, you know, we had the COVID supply chain collapse, we had the automotive chip shortages, we have geopolitical tensions, and all of that sort of culminated into the sudden public realization that the devices that power our modern life are produced by a very small number of companies in a very small number of locations. And what that shift meant from a media perspective is that semiconductors sort of moved from a specialist area into more front page news again overnight. And as managing editor in the electronics industry, I watched as sort of mainstream media that had never touched semiconductor stories before were suddenly commissioning them sort of left, right, and centre. You know, political correspondents, economics editors, foreign policy journalists were all of a sudden writing about fabs and nodes and supply chains, and the volume of coverage increased dramatically. And most of that coverage sort of treats the sector as almost like a geopolitical sort of chessboard without really engaging in what I see as sort of the engineering reality underneath it. And I think that creates a problem and an opportunity. The problem is perhaps some misinformation, some inflated expectations, but the opportunity is that sort of trade press is, which really understands the engineering, is now more valuable as a corrective and contextualizing voice than it has ever been. And I think for the ecosystems in the room, that's the strategic importance of semiconductors is now a communication asset, only if you use it correctly, which I'm sure we will talk about further in the conversation. But yeah, that's my 5 cents.
Thank you,
5
Paige.
That's good.
Pat, let me bring you into the conversation.
Okay, so as you may be able to hear, I'm American and I'm based in France. We wouldn't say 5 cents, we'd say 2 cents. That's American, I don't know. Maybe it's a little higher now with inflation. So my name is Pat Brans. I'm American, based in Grenoble, France, and I'm a freelance journalist for EE Times worldwide. Okay, I also work for a few other publications, but this particular topic is EE Times. So I come here from the perspective of a journalist who writes about semiconductors for both technical and business audiences. So one of the biggest challenges is there's no such thing as a technical reader. All right. So a reader might be highly technical in software, enterprise IT, telecoms, cloud, AI, physics, or manufacturing, but still not know the details of lithography, advanced packaging, photonics, metrology, chiplets, FDSOI, or quantum devices. Okay. So the job is not to dumb down the subject, but to translate without distorting. Okay. Even to highly technical readers who may not know so much about the particular topic we're talking about. So good semiconductor communication has to preserve technical accuracy while making clear why the topic matters. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the challenge of a journalist in the semiconductor industry, but I'm also going to talk a little bit later about what does it mean to companies, and companies want to be visible. Why do they want to be visible? We'll talk about that. And how can they help the journalists make them visible in an appropriate manner? Okay, we don't want to just be visible for nothing. All right, so that means every article needs to be a bridge between technical detail and the broader consequences. Why do we care, right? So what problem does this solve? Why now? Who cares? What changes if this succeeds? What are we doing? What is it? What's going to make? What's the impact? What is still uncertain? What do we still have to do? What does it mean for customers, investors, talent, policymakers? Policymakers is a big topic today. We just talked about the CHIPS Act 2.0 yesterday. The big proposal came out yesterday. Or the wider ecosystem. We're talking about ecosystems all around Europe and Spain, the Valencian ecosystem, for example. Now, another major challenge is identifying what is genuinely newsworthy. In semiconductors, almost everything can sound important because the sector itself is strategically important. Look at what countries are doing today to take a lead in semiconductors. For example, the United States government bought a nearly 10% stake in Intel last year. I don't know if everybody knows that, right? And they've recently promised to buy stakes in some of the quantum companies. That's highly unusual. The only time the American government does that was in the past was for failing industries that the government couldn't let fail. But now this is strategic, so it's strategically important. So, but not every announcement is equally meaningful. A new partnership, pilot line, research result, fab expansion, funding round, or product launch may be significant, or it may be mainly the company positioning itself. So journalists have to cut through the hype. Very often, press releases overuse adjectives and superlatives. Groundbreaking, revolutionary, world-class, first of its kind, game-changing, right? These words are usually not the story. The story is in the evidence behind them. What is actually new? What has been demonstrated? What is commercially available? What customer problem is being solved, and what independent voices say about it? So one recurring weakness in semiconductor communications is the canned executive quote. Canned means prepared, right? So many press releases include a CEO or a C-level quote that says something like, The company is excited, proud, delighted, and that the announcement underscores its commitment or something like that. That doesn't help one bit. The journalist can't do anything with that. So what helps is a quote that explains a strategic choice, a technical trade-off, a market signal. What is this signal for the overall market? A bottleneck or a risk. Another problem, surprisingly, is that it's hard to find. Sometimes you can't get in touch with the source. So when a press release comes out, the first thing a journalist wants to do, if he or she wants to cover it, is talk to a source and get something exclusive. Companies put out press releases because they want coverage, right? But very often, when a journalist asks to follow up with questions, the company is not available or they can only provide written statements. That's no good. It makes it harder to write a serious story. If companies want meaningful visibility, they need to make credible people available, engineers, product leaders, CTOs, customers, partners, and sometimes outside experts. So journalists are looking for exclusive insights, not just repackaged announcements. The best stories come when a company helps explain the context around the announcement. Why did you make this choice? What failed before this worked? What is hard about scaling it? What are customers asking for? What does this say about the direction of the industry? So companies want to be visible. Companies want to get in touch with journalists. That's probably one of the reasons we're having this conversation, to help companies understand what journalists do. So why does visibility matter? Well, visibility matters because semiconductor ecosystems, or companies, compete not only for customers, but also for investment, talent, policy attention, and mind share. So let's talk about visibility. Visibility is not the same as publicity. Publicity is short-term attention. Visibility is accumulated credibility. It's a long-term putting out messages here and there that are consistent and credible. It comes from repeatedly telling clear, grounded, technically credible stories that connect local capabilities to global industry needs. Now, this is important for companies, but there's a trade-off. Engineers, founders, executives are busy. When they spend time talking with the journalists or appearing at conferences, that's time they're not spending building products, raising money, managing teams, or working with customers. So communication has to be strategic. Not every company needs to comment on everything, but when there is a real story to tell, the return on a serious conversation can be much greater than the return on a generic press release. So my main message to companies wanting to be, or ecosystems wanting to become more visible in the press, is avoid hype. Okay? Make experts available. These are my main messages. Avoid hype. Make experts available. Explain the stakes. Show evidence. Just because you say it's wonderful doesn't mean it's wonderful. Build long-term credibility rather than chasing short-term attention. So I'll finish with one line. The challenge is not making semiconductors simple. It's making them intelligible without stripping out what makes them important.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you, Pat. We have a lot of questions, open questions, and many challenges in this specialized communication on semiconductors. Thank you, Pat. And Riccardo, I would love to hear your perspective.
All right. I mean, a lot of things that are already said by Pat, but anyway, I want to start with a distinction that I think matters a lot in this room. I mean, the difference that was already underlined in the previous speech. I mean, the difference between visibility and credibility. I mean, because in my experience covering the industry, that you get confused constantly, and that confusion is expensive. It's expensive in terms of spending money and expensive in terms of spending time. That is most important. I mean, visibility is easy to generate. We can say a fab announcement, a CHIPS Act subsidy, a ministerial press conference, you get coverage for a few days and then it's gone in general. I mean, credibility is something absolutely different. I mean, it builds slowly through a consistent record of delivery that survives scrutiny at supply chain level. And the people who apply that scrutiny are not journalists in general. They are design team, procurement managers, tier one OEMs, for example, people who have made a qualified judgment based on evidence, not on press releases. And we speak about press releases later on. But an ecosystem that is visible but not credible will be in the conversation during an announcement cycle and absent from it when an actual sourcing decision is being made. That is a big problem, I think. And the second thing I want to flag is what has changed in how semiconductor stories get covered, because something has changed quite significantly in the last 3 or 4 years. Everybody knows that. I mean, the geopolitical turn has raised the floor, we can say. I mean, stories that would have been adequate in 2020, for example, product cycles, market share, fab capacity, now compete with coverage which goes into process nodes, in material dependencies, export controls, foundry utilization is much more in depth. I mean, the stories that holds up are the ones built around the forcing function. I'd like to explain what's a forcing function. I mean, a regulatory deadline, a qualification cycle that is closing, a capacity decision that forecloses an option. That is what converts analysis into something a procurement manager will actually act on. And geopolitics, I think, has brought a much larger audience to semiconductor coverage, as colleagues say in the previous speeches. It has not necessarily made that coverage better, and that gap is something the trade press has specific responsibility to close, I'm afraid. And the third point is about the press releases, and I will be direct. The ones that generate coverage lead with something verifiable, a yield figure, a qualification milestone, a named customer, capacity number that can be checked. The ones that do not generate coverage lead with a sort of a revolutionary solution, as he said Pat before, and proud to announce, and market leader and so on, and quote from CEO that could have been written by anyone about anything in any industry. And that is not a stylistic preference on my part, it's a functional problem. I cannot report a claim I cannot verify. Give me a number, a name, give me a timeline, that is a story. And sometimes that don't happen. I mean, and underneath all of this is a structural issue that I keep coming back to. Ecosystem that only communicate when they have something to announce, for example, a founding round, a policy win, a new partnership, lose the compounding effect of being consistently present. When a disruption arises and they suddenly need to be legible on international audience, the groundwork is not there. And the story is not built under pressure, which is exactly when it gets built badly, I'm afraid. The ecosystem that have a genuine international standards are the one that maps the dependency and made them visible while everything was still working, not after an export ban forced the issue. So I had to leave one thing with this room. I mean, it would be this: the call is not to be more visible. It is to be visible to the right people in the right moment, before the crisis, not during it. Because all our job is not marketing, is infrastructure, I'm afraid. And that's all. Okay.
Thank you, Riccardo. Grazie for your introduction, for your presentation. And now, Luc, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I have never been a journalist, so I think I would just try to express also my observation. I actually think the comments about verification is very, very important, and both in the demand side and the supply side. And because I think in semiconductor industry, if you look at the fabs, the infrastructure, the development, it takes a lot of time and efforts. And if you talk about geopolitical and the investment, which sometimes the countries and the company need to do, means every single decision for them, for the executives, they need to verify again and again and again how solid is the demand, because every decision has a huge consequences. So I fully agree here. So if there are a lot of news reporting which is not verified, go deeper, it's very likely we lose credibility. And actually the executives in the sector, they have been so familiar with this because they call it, I don't know, some countries call it hot air, some people call it just about like, yeah. So, and the same with the supply side, because supply side, if you look at, I mean, equipment, chemicals, all of that go into the delivery system. It's very, very evidence based, because again, if there is something making a mistake, the yield, just a very small percentage of yield change, it make the successful and failure huge differences. So I would say that's actually probably one of the more difficult one, because the industry is so big, and how do you verify it? And that probably means we need to go deeper with a narrower domain that makes more credibility and more sustainable. And here, what I also want to share is, I mean, if we look at what is happening now, I mean, the same week, there is at the same time another big show in Taiwan. The demand side we see, AI is, I mean, it's always like one emerging needs drive the whole industry, and that's actually what everybody in the sector is focusing on. So before we have PC and then laptop and smartphone. So everybody was chasing what's the next generation of that, because this is how the whole demand pool, the whole business. And of course, now we all know it's AI. And this week it's about robotics, AI, physical AI, and agentic AI. So those are the things, if they are verified demand, also from Europe or wherever you can see, that will attract really strong attention, because that's where people want. I mean, also, if you listen to Jason Huang's speech, he was talking about, oh, token is profitable. And now it is, so even in that level, they are trying to verify how profitable is AI and this and that. So those are the things which really travel far. And I think I just talk also, I'm a practitioner also now with a startup called BeyondFence. And of course, as a startup in Oxford, we haven't got too much visibility, but we also try to focus on doing groundwork. So one major publicity is with Siemens, talking linked with physical AI and EU Chip Act. But that's really just really the chance for us to do more groundwork, delivery evidence. Before then, we do more promotion type of things. And we do see, especially this physical AI, there are a lot of opportunities in Europe because of it goes into application. And Europe does have a lot of in-depth sectors, from agriculture to food to medical device. So the combination of new semiconductor-driven technology with very solid European technology will create a lot of opportunities. And of course, we need to try to get into the front face of this emerging area. And the last thing is, because evidence is so important, if we can have more pilot activities to capture the data, to capture the evidence, that also help the publicity, the visibility, the evidence, and the credibility of companies or regions or the development path. Yeah, that's from me.
Thank you for your approach, Luc, and thank you all for your opening remarks. And there are really several interesting aspects emerging from the discussion. And let me begin with the first of our questions. The first question is, and you have mentioned in your in your speeches. The first question is, despite the strategic importance of semiconductors, why the sector is still struggle to achieve broader visibility and understanding outside the specialist circles? Who would like to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to say first. Pat,
Go
you can
ahead.
go.
Go ahead, Paige.
I mean, it follows up of something that most of us have said already, which, you know, it's a highly specialized, highly technical industry, and trying to communicate that to non-specialists is very difficult. You know, I mean, the physics of a modern semiconductor is not something that's easily explainable. You know, I think, you know, Pat, you mentioned it, like a process node transitioning from 5 nanometers to 3. It involves changes in things like photolithography, transistor architecture, material science, you know, things that everyday people aren't really familiar with. And unless you're willing to dive down a rabbit hole of physics, you know, the general audience isn't going to be able to understand that. You know, so I think most people choose to go down a route of abstraction, and that tends to lose the technical significance. And I think the solution is not to simplify the physics, it's to translate it into sort of understandable consequences. So, you know, you don't need to explain lithography to explain that without it, the phone in your pocket couldn't exist, or you don't need to explain power density trade-offs to explain that the chip in your car is going to allow you the charge to help your car go further. You know, the translation from technical fact to human consequence, I think, is the missing step in most semiconductor communications, and it's a learnable skill. It's something that can be taught, and I think it's the story is not necessarily the technical achievement itself. It's, you know, who it affects, what problem it solved. I mean, you know, things we've mentioned already, and I think most semiconductor communications don't necessarily make this translation because they're not trained to communicate to peers who don't understand it. And I think teaching them to make that translation is going to be sort of a big investment that organizations can make.
Pat, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. It's very complicated. A book I would recommend is Chip War.
Yes, I just finished that the other week, actually.
Excellent. Yeah, it explains very well the history of the semiconductor industry. It explains why it started out, how it started. It was funded by military budgets, like a lot of technology. And by the way, the U.S. Has a wartime military budget since 1942. You know, really. So it's always said with a wartime budget, they funnel that budget into technology. And semiconductors are very important for aiming missiles, right? All this high-tech military equipment. And so that's how it started out. Now, it's become strategic for lots of other reasons. Now we have AI, right? So now you used to just have a CPU and a few integrated circuits. Now you have GPUs and all the other PUs. And so you have, it becomes much more complicated. And you also have a very complicated supply chain. It's a capital-intensive industry. It takes a lot to get started if you're a fab, right? You have to buy all the equipment, and it takes a long time to generate your first chips. And so it's not just that the technology is complicated, but it's the industry is complicated. And then finally, yeah, why people could very easily ask, why does it matter to us? You know, well, you don't want your country to fall behind, but you can play in different parts of the ecosystem. You know, you have the fabs in Taiwan, you have the designers in the United States, you have maybe the automotive industry in Europe, and the other kind of chip manufacturers here. But it's a very complicated industry also. So it's not just the technology that's complicated. I don't know, I'm kind of dancing around the subject, but you see what I'm saying, I guess.
Riccardo, what's your take on this?
Yes, you're definitely right. I mean, the honest answer is that complexity is a real, and most attempts to communicate is either oversimplify the point of being useless or stay so technical they lose everyone outside the room. That's a big problem. I mean, what the general press has learned to cover the policy layer. I mean, subsidies, announcement, ministerial press conferences. I mean, that is easy because there's numbers and names attached. And what is not learned to cover is what actually matters. The process layer, say, part. I mean, is something very different. I mean, not only the technology, I think, is all the things that stay behind and beyond the technology. They are quite difficult to explain to people that is not used to speak about, to read, or to dealing with so complicated technology. I mean, sometimes after 30 years of experience in this field, sometimes happens to me that I'm losing myself in so difficult things, because nobody, I mean, the big problem, I'm afraid, what is expecting a reader is a journalist that know everything. That's the problem. I mean, we are in a terrible position sometimes in which we have to know everything from the point of view of the technology. You have to be a sort of a specialist in physics of the state of the matter. You have to be a specialist on economic problems. And I worked for 7 years for one of the most important Italian newspapers, Il Sole 24 Ore. That is something like British Financial Times. And so I moved into another terrain that is absolutely normal for who's speaking about technology. I mean, is the market problems in the economical problem. I mean, our job is not as easy as seems to be from the point of our colleagues, of a generalist colleagues that are specialized on, I don't know, on foreign affairs or internal ones. I mean, it's much more complicated. But I think that the gap between announced capacity and I mean, all these the things that we are dealing with, for example, I mean, sometimes could be much more precise that every other kind of journalism exists in general in our job. I mean, I mean, AI could help us at the moment, and the gap I suspected is the 2020-22 is not because the Russians invaded the Ukraine, but it's something strange. I mean, during that period, our job changed, and changed the last 6 months. For me, I don't know if you had the same experience. It's much easier at the moment to make a control, a cross control of the sources with the help of artificial intelligence. That is fantastic for us.
Yeah.
But it's so fantastic that could be I don't know in English how can explain, is a term in Italian, I mean, is a weapon that can kill yourself. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You risk a lot. You risk a lot. So yes, we are struggling. It's difficult to explain to everybody some difficult things, but in the same time, we have the luck to be helped by an incredible system that is AI. If you can use it, you can make something that 15 years ago we could do with a very big editorial staff, very expensive. Yeah. I mean, you can do nearly everything alone, and that is fantastic. It's terrible, but in the same time, it's fantastic because a lot of colleagues of us who will lose in the future his job, or they will try to change his mind and move in another way. So even our job is changing, and is changing constantly, and I don't know what is the right direction because it's so quick, everything that is unpredictable. Sorry, I was quite confused, but I moved around a lot of branches, and this is a typical Italian. I'm sorry.
Mediterranean.
Yes.
As Spanish. Oh, thank you, Riccardo. And look, from the other side, from the side of investment, international collaboration, enterprise, is another point of view, another perspective. Look, all that resonate with your experience.
Yeah, maybe just a bit add on is I would say, because if you look at the press in Taiwan, semiconductor is like everywhere, every day. There are so much news, so much report, and so many people are reading it. So here I would say, who are the target audience, and what is their skin in the game? So the situation in Taiwan is so much embedded with the future demand, what is the supply, which factory to build, geopolitical, how much more billions will be investment into Japan or US or Germany. So it's embedded with, so the skin in the game is very high, despite the topic is very technical. But when people have the skin in the game, they read it, they will try to digest it. So the question here is just observation, who are the target audience? So either we understand why do they care, and then we translate into, regardless technical, into why does that matter. And the other topic I heard about the news is AI. Is, I would say, yes, AI makes job easier, but also more difficult, because let's say right now AI can do translation, can do consolidation, report all the news instantly. Even in Mandarin, it comes to Spanish, Italian instantly. So the difference is who has closer to the source to come out with something new. That makes more special. Otherwise, I think, we can read every day what is happening in other part of the world, the news, the journalists reporting very quickly into our language instantly. And that's the double side of AI, right?
Yeah, I think that's sorry, can I just add a point about, I mean, we could talk for hours about how AI is going to replace journalism. But I think Riccardo and Luc have raised some good points. And I think the problem I see with AI is that I think it means that anyone can become a writer now. You know, it's very easy to put a prompt into ChatGPT and ask it to write you a press release. I mean, I don't know, Riccardo and Pat, what your inboxes are like, but I feel like the amount of pitches and press releases that I get in my inbox now has almost doubled. And, you know, it's just become a little bit too much. But I think it will go full circle in that I think people will start to crave human generated content again, and that's where I think people like the trade media and that they're going to provide something special, in that we have the sources and the contacts to get that exclusive content and to get that inside information and to verify the facts and figures that these AI generated press releases are pushing out. And I think, that's it's a double-edged sword with AI at the minute, I think.
Yeah, it's an excellent.
Sorry, may I say only one thing? Speaking about the use of the AI from us at the moment, I mean, is right. I mean, all the amount of press releases increased dramatically since a couple of years right now. But the added value we can put on our job is our experience. That's a problem. I mean, everybody can read a quite decent press release at the moment. But unfortunately, when I want to be sure if something is real or not, I go to Reuters, I go to Associated Press. I don't go anywhere, you know, or I have the possibility to put together, but I mean, with a very quick process that before needs a week, 10 days. Now in 5 minutes, I could resolve the problem. And at the same time, as Luc was saying, I mean, it's possible to read something that since 5 years ago was incredible. For example, I could read all the newspapers and extract from newspaper from Taiwan what's happened to Computex 2026 yesterday in just in time, and that is fantastic if you think. I mean, resolve a lot of problems, but we have to have the modesty to know that is our experience that can change the situation and can make a product, a journalist product, valuable. And because everything else is all over information and nothing else. That's the problem. Thanks.
Like any other tool, and like any other tool. And I like your expression, Riccardo, about how it's a tool that can kill you. We say something like that, but I can't think of what it is. But it's
yes, I don't know in English.
Yeah.
How can say in English a double-edged
sword.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, or
I mean, that could kill yourself. You used to kill somebody else, but kill yourself. That's the problem.
Or it gives you enough rope to hang yourself.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Okay. So
exactly.
But it's, I would say it's a wonderful slave. AI is a wonderful slave. It's a good assistant. And I think there's lots of ways you can use it. Like I said, you can cross-check, you can interview somebody, you can transcribe, and you can use it to compare and contrast what different people said. You can double-check somebody, you can look up all sorts of information in different languages. There's all sorts of things you can do with it, but it can't really understand the meaning. You can use it. It doesn't really think, of course. It doesn't really understand meaning, and it doesn't make connections. It doesn't understand what's important. So fortunately for us, we still have a job right now, but we can do our job much better because it's a very powerful tool. And I think so we can deliver something that, and we can. I use it also to help me make transition between ideas. I said, help me out with that. I don't feel like I'm transitioning between these ideas. Help me out with this. Things like that. So we can deliver a much higher quality product, no doubt about it. And actually one of the big stories is not only is this industry enabling AI, but we're using AI to explain the industry in our case and to help design and manufacture chips. It's being used in the industry. So and to find new materials.
Yes, I agree totally.
Yeah.
It shows there are an important debate on the issue. And let's move to our second question. I think it's a key question too. What are the biggest communication mistakes that semiconductor companies, institutions, and ecosystems continue to make today? Pat, perhaps probably this is a good place to say, given your experience.
This is what we call my pet peeve. The thing that bothers me most. Like I said, superlatives, wonderful, groundbreaking. The CEO said we are so committed to this. Okay, that's bullshit. Bullshit's a nice word. They don't hype. Try to build credibility slowly, right? Talk about topics that are relevant to the industry, not necessarily don't constantly try to sell your product, your company, or yourself. Build credibility. That would be a piece of advice I'd have. I don't know. Does that sort of meet your kind of what you were asking for?
Luc?
I actually just typing because I sorry need to go in 2 minutes. Mistakes, I would say I wouldn't want to name certain countries or certain regions, but if you just look the evidence, there were quite many very high profile public publications, even from really high level head of state or whatever. And later on, things didn't happen, and that type of thing is it's not very helpful for the credibility and visibility. Actually, visibility, but not for the right thing. So, but it's difficult because right now with the geopolitical challenges and all this fragile thing, and that's the reason maybe the easiest is really to verify the actual demand, because that doesn't go wrong.
Yeah.
And that's also, if you look at the semiconductor biggest players, they always, regardless, there's a lot of kind of geopolitical discussion, but the biggest thing they always want to verify is, do consumer really want that? What is the evidence of that? Because that is, regardless, the demand is there, then the business is there, and what do we do? There will be be used. So that could be one way to, like, what is different level of verifications for that. And I wouldn't call it mistake. It's just the challenges of our time, right? Yeah.
Sorry, Pat.
Sorry about this. I do need to go. So because
all right.
Thank you so much.
We can understand. Thank you for your contribution to the discussion, Luc.
Yeah. Thank you. But we keep in contact. Yeah. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Nice to meet
Bye.
you. We continue, Pat. Do you want to follow your answer on this issue on the main mistakes on communicating semiconductors, microelectronics industry?
But let me start out by saying, let's back up for a second and say there is value in being known. Okay, if you look at it, some of the companies who raise capital do so because they're in the press, right? So you want to be in the press. There's a lot of value to being in the press. You also attract employees, and you maybe gain some customers and partners. So there's a lot of value to be in the press. It's a very complicated industry. Most of us buy on reference, so we don't go to something we don't buy anything from somebody we've never heard of. Right, so we want to hear about something. So when we hear about something, we trust it. So, but however, having said that, you have to be careful how you're being perceived in the press. And so, as Luc was pointing out, in certain countries, my own, there's a lot of people that say a lot of stuff that isn't true in the press, right? And so you need to be very careful in this industry. In the software industry, there was a lot of this. In the technology industry, there was a lot of this hype. The technology industry is known for hype, right? But in semiconductors, I think you need to be a little more credible. I think it's probably more serious. There's definitely value in being known. So it's a really good idea to be known, but be known in a credible fashion. Build your credibility over time, and then that will pay off. That'll pay. I see it pay off every day. I look around. I look around and see the companies that have raised capital. And it's the companies that have been talking to the press, and they've been saying intelligent things to the press. They have new ideas. They talk about, like I said, remember, journalists have to, first of all, get their article approved by the editor. And if you're the editor, you can't just write about anything. You have to write about something that makes sense. So we have to write about things that our readers want to hear, that somebody's going to read. There's something, we can't just write about something just because somebody raise money or something like that. We want to know, we need to some important event that has an impact we need to talk about. So when you approach the press, make sure you have something that's newsworthy and that you can talk credibly about it in a balanced way. Okay, so there's every story has trade-offs, bottlenecks, what has to happen next, further work to do, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Paige and Riccardo, do you agree with the idea of organizations still relying too heavily on traditional ways to communicate, like press release, for example, or yes, Paige.
Yeah, I think we're seeing it change. I mean, there's so many different platforms and so many different means of communication now. I mean, podcasts, for example, are, they've grown in popularity over the last couple of years. Webinars, things like that. If you can get a high-level CEO or C-suite official on a podcast for 45 minutes, that's a real human talking about real problems, answering questions in real time. And I think there's a lot of there's different ways to just press releases. You've got special newsletters now that are dedicated to certain niches in the semiconductor industry. I mean, LinkedIn has become a fantastic platform. I mean, if you can get a lead engineer to do a post on LinkedIn about a new product that they've just announced. I mean, that's going to get you so much more visibility to the right audience than perhaps just a generic press release to a bunch of media professionals is. And it's, yeah, that's my thoughts anyway.
But I agree as well with saying, Paige. I mean, the different kind of communication system make I mean, your life easier to live. But in any case, that creates some monsters, I'm afraid, because everybody has the right to be a journalist at the moment. This is my sensation. I mean, since you have the AI, you have LinkedIn, you have a system that creates your podcast immediately, no problem with your voice and so on. Make the big and medium companies and the idea to make the communication from themselves. And I mean, I experience in Italy sometimes people that want to do everything inside the company, overlapping to our job. And the results are terrible sometimes because they don't know exactly what they are dealing with, the news, are dealing with sources and so on. And so create a sort of a noise. It's not only our problem, it's their problem, it is a general problem. I mean, it's a noise that cannot be amended in a proper way and easily. I mean, you create a sort of a terrible noise that is all around you and you don't know, and you make a lot of efforts to understand where are the real facts and so on. But in any case, I would say that the most common mistakes companies and ecosystem keep making is leading with capability instead of consequence. I think if you, for example, a clean room, a process know the headcount figures, none of that answer the question of an international stakeholder is actually asking. That is, what breaks if you are not there? And so I say, if you cannot answer that question clearly and specifically, you are not communicating, you are broadcasting, and this is the problem. I mean, a lot of our colleagues that find easy to communicate with the new systems. I mean, I'm the editor-in-chief of the two traditional magazines that are printed. It's like Electronic Specifier. And I mean, our activity is absolutely different from the people that has only an experience on online products. And that because, I don't know, it's not I mean, I can say in English, it's difficult to explain, but in any case, I mean, it's not a good sign. It's not a fortune, a luck to be old and to have an experience on classical journalism. But as I told you before, I mean, this experience make the value added to a good job and a good, I can say, result of your job. I mean, a good article, a good communication of content. Otherwise, you create a lot of problems. That's the problem. I mean, it's difficult to understand what exactly are the mistakes companies and ecosystem are making, I'm afraid, because everybody, we are doing a lot of mistakes from this point of view. And the lack of communication creates noise and confusion. That's a big problem. Right.
Mm-hmm. And from your experience working for European specialized media, Europe has a challenge. The European semiconductor industry has a challenge of visibility in global terms, and how communication could contribute to improve the visibility of the European industry. from your experience? Pat, Paige, Riccardo.
Well, I would go back to what Luc said, that maybe the fundamental thing is to build first and then talk about it afterwards. I think Europe is lagging behind in a lot of ways, and the semiconductor industry. It's definitely the third pole.
Mm.
You know, it's not the second or the first, right? So, well, you know, so it's not visible because it's not as fundamental. It's not doing the fundamental thing. Okay, having said that, ASML is in Europe, right? So there is some of the fundamental equipment, right? But in terms of the big activities, it's in North America and Asia.
Paige, Riccardo, do you agree?
Yeah, I think again it comes back to some points that Luc raised, is that, you know, in Taiwan it's almost like it's a national identity. You know, TSMC's quarterly earnings are national news. Process node announcements are followed by political commentary. You know, the workforce sees semiconductor careers as a source of national pride and personal status. And, you know, I mean, even in the US, you've got Silicon Valley, you know, that the media industry has been covering for X amount of years. So they've already got the right framing, and they can break into the mainstream audiences more easily than in Europe. I mean, you can just look at the CHIPS Act and the resulting coverage that resulted in for, you know, Intel and TSMC in Arizona and Samsung in Texas. And it demonstrated that I think that the appetite exists when the political hook is present. And I think Europe lacks on both of these advantages. You know, the industry is geographically and institutionally fragmented across national contexts, and there's no one critical mass that creates a single coherent narrative. You know, there's no European TSMC, I guess. You know, there's no single company or institution around which a pan-European semiconductor identity can form, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
From my point of view, it's a problem of language mainly. I mean, because you are both of you are English speakers, while we have to move from other words and other languages. And so, I mean, we try to struggle every day with English. That is not our language, and sometimes that could be difficult or not precise because it's not in our mentality. I mean, my language is Italian. I use English as another language for Kristin as well. I mean, for you not, because you living in your context, and the problem is the English as language of technology is very definitive. I mean, I could see the difference between the communication in Taiwan or in the Far East that have the same problem instead of the communication that comes from England or from US. And in Europe, we are struggling. For example, there are a lot of information that I would like to understand, for example, from Dutch and German press. And sometimes I have problem because we have to, not for Spanish, for example, because it's easier to ask to understand. But, I mean, our problem and what's happened, if you want to be winner, we have to move towards English. And you can see a lot of Italian or Spanish publications in both languages. Because if you want to attract more readers, you have to move where everybody's speaking in the same language. And I think this is the most important thing. Otherwise, we remain in our small market, because Italian is a small market compared to the American or the Far East market. And I mean, we are struggling in a very small courtyard, we can say. So that's the difficulties. I mean, I'm writing articles in Italian, not in English. That's a problem. I could translate them, but in any case, my readers read Italian and they prefer to do it. And you cannot imagine how it's difficult to amend the press releases from influences of English. It's something terrible in Italian. And in Spanish, I think it's just the same, you know, and it's another problem we have that you fortunately you haven't. That's
an interesting point.
Oh
Interesting
yes,
point,
oh yes.
Riccardo.
Not easy. It's not easy at all.
It's not easy. Exactly. And for our final discussion question before the conclusion, if an emerging semiconductor ecosystem wants to become internationally recognized over the next 5 years, what communication strategy would you recommend? Pat, Paige, Riccardo.
Well, again, I think
it's a bit difficult.
I'm
It's
sorry?
very
Okay.
difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, well, first of all, you have to have something you have to have impact, obviously. Okay. Now there are companies that have impact that don't communicate at all. TSMC doesn't communicate a lot except for its reports, but it doesn't really talk to the press very much. ASML doesn't talk to the press very much. So there are companies that do have huge impact but don't talk to the press. So, I mean, but first of all, you do have to have some kind of an impact. Nobody's going to pay attention to you just because you're yelling, you know, you're out there screaming about what you do. So I would say focus mostly on what you're doing. And then after that, like I said before, as I would say, develop a communication plan that builds credibility. Have a style, have a communication style, develop that.
And I guess following on from that, have a specific claim about what makes you distinctive, right? You know, effective story building or storytelling builds from that position outwards. So, you know, this is what we do specifically, and this is why it matters technically. This is the evidence to show that we do it well, and this is the human story of the people behind it, you know, and each layer adds a different level of credibility. You know, the technical claim appeals to the engineers, the evidence appeals to investors and analysts, and the human story appeals to journalists and to potential talent as well. And I think a communication strategy that only operates at one of these layers will only reach one audience effectively and probably miss some of the others. But also, I think for me, the biggest thing is building long-term reputation rather than short-term visibility. So a news cycle is going to last 24 to 72 hours, you know, and a reputation is what remains after every news cycle has passed. So reputation is built through the accumulation of credible, verifiable, consistent communication over years. And it's what causes a journalist to think of your ecosystem when we're writing our features, or an investor to include your region in a sourcing search, or a talented engineer to consider your cluster when you're evaluating career opportunities. And this strategic implication is how every communication decision, I think, should be evaluated, not just for its immediate impact, but for its effect on long-term reputation as well.
Thank you, Paige. Riccardo?
Yes, but I'm moving again on a problem. I mean, it's very difficult to understand what could be prioritized over the next 5 years. But I mean, by my opinion, map the dependency before claiming the capability. I could say something like that. I mean, the ecosystem that have built real international standing are the ones that make themselves now legible to the right stakeholder before a crisis forced the introduction. I mean, that means being specific and public about where you sit in the supply chain. For example, that breaks without you, that cost of requalification would be for a tier 1 customer. It means communicating continuously, not in announcement cycles, as we all say before. And it means resisting the temptation to lead with ambition, roadmaps, targets, strategic vision, when what international stakeholders are actually evaluating is evidence, I think. I mean, stress tested delivery, name relationship, I don't know, very verifiable milestones. Ambition without a track record is noise, as I told you before, because the evidence is what gets you into the decision set. I could stop in this way. it's very difficult anyway, because we have not the, what's the name in English? Sorry. The crystal sphere to see in
crystal ball.
Crystal ball, yeah.
to see
Yes.
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
future.
No, we don't have the crystal ball. I would have never guessed
No.
any of the things that have happened in the last 2 years.
Yes, that 5 years is a so long term. you know.
Incredible.
Yeah.
No
Yes,
way.
it's
Yeah.
like 30 years before. Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
incredible. Good.
We approach to the end of our session. I would like to invite each speaker to share one final thought or final reflection or recommendation. Just 1, 2, 3 minutes. If you need a Paige, Pat, Riccardo.
Yeah,
Recommendation or
recommendations.
a reflection.
Oh my God.
Oh.
I don't want to start. Let's start. The lady, Paige, please.
Paige.
Oh, I see how it is. Pass it on to me. It's fine. I can say all the good things, and then you'll have nothing left to say.
Yes.
Or a reflection on the role of. I think it's very important to remark the role of specialized media. This is a very special, very important bet for the communication. Perhaps it's important to make a reflection on this.
Well, let me just say just a couple of sentences on some advice. I think what we've covered here today is that it's very key that you need to build substance first. Build substance and then communicate with who you want to, journalists, investors, whoever that is, but communicate it with verifiable evidence, and importantly, communicate it in a timely manner. I mean, this comes back to, this is a bugbear for me, a bit like superlatives is for Pat, but make yourself available to journalists and trade journalists for comments and phone calls in a timely manner. I know it sounds obvious, but editors and journalists, we have a deadline, we have a word count, and we need to get this story out to our readers in a timely fashion. And I think the companies that can respond quickly and provide useful information and make a technical expert available for a brief conversation are going to be companies that become visible in a good way. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Paige. Pat?
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with what Paige said, that if you want to be in the press, that's what you do. Some companies don't want to be in the press. It's funny that some of them really do avoid being, they don't talk to the press about anything. That is a strategy too, okay? But if you're trying to raise money and you want to get visible in your startup, you probably should be in the press. But like Paige says, build substance, build credibility, be available. And also, by the way, I would also say, think about what you want to read. Do you want to read some of that stuff? No. So, think about what you want to see in a story.
Good point.
Yes, I agree. Definitely. We'll say parts. Credibility is the most important thing you have to follow. In the same time, as a suggestion is this one. Now that is easy, even for the English speakers, to read different languages, look all around more precisely what's happened all around the world, because I know sometimes a colleague of mine from UK or US don't know anything happened in Italy or in Germany or in France because of this wall. Now this wall is broken, because with AI you can understand just in time what we are saying, and sometimes we say something quite interesting, definitely. Yes, and otherwise, I don't know how can leave as my thoughts. Don't be a slave by press releases, and try to go deeper into technology and into economics, and leave all this noise outside your life. That's the only possibility we have. Moving very fast, too fast, I'm afraid. All right. Thank you very much. for everything.
Thank you very much, Paige, Pat, and Riccardo. I would like to thank all for your insights and your generosity and your participation today in our session at the third Valencia Silicon Forum. And thank you as well to everyone who joined us in person, online, and contributed through. And if there is one idea I take away from today's discussion, it is that visibility is not automatic. Obviously, it's not automatic. It has to be built deliberately with clarity, credibility, and consistency. This is very, very important. And communication is not a secondary issue for the semiconductor sector. It is part of how ecosystems build trust, attract opportunities, and connect internationally. Thank you once again for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the Valencia Silicon Forum to the attendees, and I hope Paige, Pat, Riccardo, I hope we can see the next edition of Valencia Silicon Forum in Valencia in person.
Yes,
I hope
That would be nice.
yes. We will come by ourselves, and everybody will attend. Electronica is this, yes, Electronica in Munich.
Yes, yeah.
So we can take a coffee all together if you want. It would be quite a good thing. All right.
That'd be lovely.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a nice
I pass
idea.
to your booth and I pick you up. All right. Yes.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Grazie.
Bye.
Grazie.
Ciao, grazie. Ciao.
Bye.